MicroStrategy were a zombie company floating around a $1 billion market cap. They were around for 25 years, saw no real love from the market, no real share price appreciation. Look where they are now. But again, if you look at it from an individual standpoint, I would treat myself as a zombie individual. You're kind of floating around El Salvador as a zombie country to an extent. So the people, the individual, the company, the country that has been marginalized are the ones to see Bitcoin first, which makes sense.
As CoinDesk's senior analyst, James Van Straten unpacks Bitcoin and the macro landscape, revealing the forces shaping this emerging world.
With experience at Swiss hedge fund Sadler and Company, he leverages on-chain analytics to track flows and show how Bitcoin fits into the financial system.
Is there ever going to be an end to this? How long will Bitcoin keep going up?
And I believe we're still in a 4-year cycle, and I believe we're still tracking the prior 2 cycles very, very closely. New highs, and we're looking at that 2017 bull run where Bitcoin made a 10x. So a 10x from here is $1 million a coin. I'm not saying we're going to hit, I don't think we're going to hit $1 million a coin. I have around a price target. I do think it's going up on the basis that they will continue to print money forever. That's just the nature of the beast. But how I'm positioning it is...
Yo guys, welcome back to another episode of Less Noise, More Signal. This time we have another British person on the podcast with a Dutch name, I suppose, James Van Straten. Hey, cool to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. How are you doing?
Great. I'm doing well. Yeah, just currently in Cape Town, enjoying some of the good weather, and just also enjoying CT. As like Cape Town is called CT, like Cape Town, but I know CT as crypto Twitter, so I get to enjoy like online currently CT, but then as well like obviously in real life. So both is quite fun, so to say. We're going from sort of the top is in to like there's no lid on this thing from within a heartbeat. I feel like whatever the price does. But how have you been?
Yeah, good. I'm extremely pale compared to you, so that's a downside. But no, since going to Bitcoin Mina, which was a really good conference, there's been huge amounts of treasury adoption by public companies. Sentiment fluctuates like the wind with the price. So it's been a very interesting start to the year.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you mentioned Bitcoin Mina. That's where I originally kind of met you as well. And I was following you on X already before, but then ever since then, some of your tweets obviously caught my attention, and that's why I wanted to talk to you. And you already mentioned like the Bitcoin corporate adoption and everything. So this is what I would like to go into. But maybe just first off, can you quickly introduce yourself in a little more detail? What are you doing?
Yeah, so I currently work full-time for CoinDesk as their senior analyst, understanding the market, the insights, how Bitcoin and kind of links in with the macro and TradFi world, anything from options and on-chain data. And that's pretty much what I spend most of my time on doing, just to see how everything kind of has evolved. I've been in the space for about 7 years. I was previously a hedge fund in Switzerland, in Zug, which I know is where you're based. And that's where I got introduced to on-chain analytics. I've always been in data, so I've always had that knack for numbers. And it just kind of felt right to take that plunge. I think I've been working in Bitcoin now for about 5 years, 4 or 5 years, and it's been the best decision ever.
Nice. Well, cool. I didn't know about the hedge fund. Was that crypto related as well, or
just they were called Sadler and Co. So they were a really early investor in Bitcoin, and they wanted to kind of scale out their research department. So there was quite a few of us doing different topics. So I was on the bit of derivatives, on chain, and obviously you had like layer ones. So, but my interest is always being within Bitcoin, and that's kind of where I've kind of stayed at.
Okay, I see. Interesting. I never heard about them, but yeah, in Zug, there's so many of these hedge funds and like related companies. So Interesting. I mean, you mentioned CoinDesk. Like, just for maybe folks to understand, most of the people know CoinDesk for their like media outlet. With the articles that the constantly being published. And are you writing articles yourself as well, or are you more on a different sort of venue when it comes to CoinDesk?
No, I'm producing articles as well, just in pretty much the same what I'm seeing in the market, any insights or alpha, um, and then report on that. So it's similar to a journalist, but more data driven on that side.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Cool. Well, yeah, maybe we want to venture into this topic that you mentioned, corporate adoption. So I would just be interested in knowing your thoughts there. Obviously, MicroStrategy has been the leader. We've seen a few other companies tag along as well, but I keep on hearing this question, like, although there are companies coming online, some people are still sort of, there hasn't been that much sort of corporate adoption. Why is this? And maybe you have some thoughts there.
Yeah, so we obviously saw the pioneers MicroStrategy in August of 2020 that took their defensive play. We had inflation, uncertainty. Don't need to go into the whole story of that. And it did take a good couple of years for anyone to copy it. I think a lot of people were on the sidelines waiting to see MicroStrategy fail. I think that was, they were going to be the poster boy in 2000 during the tech boom. And I think during the 2022 bear market, I think everyone was expecting them to be liquidated, or all the bears' favorite story. And then I think after we emerged out of the bear market, you then get that positive sentiment, and I think companies took it seriously. It only then took, I think, till 2023, 2024, or actually 2024, when we saw Semler Scientific and Metaplanet take the plunge as well. Metaplanet being the most successful stock of the past year. Semler Scientific have also had huge share price appreciation, and I think that put even more interest in boardrooms. So I have spoken to public companies about Bitcoin adoption, just to understand what Bitcoin is, how it sits as an asset on the balance sheet, why they should hold it. So these are conversations that I've had in boardrooms. So this definitely going on. And you're then having, I would put those companies as mainly wave one. You could even put MicroStrategy as wave one, and then Semler and Metaplanet and maybe one or two others in wave two. So, but what we're seeing now in the past 2 to 3 months is a whole different wave of adoption. So as we were saying beforehand, 11 companies have announced a Bitcoin treasury strategy. 4 of them have announced and acquired Bitcoin, all different types of industries. So that is from Hong Kong based. I think they were in construction. You have a couple of AI companies. They hold around 500 Bitcoin. The Hong Kong company does. Kula hold around over 400 Bitcoin. And then you had Genius Group as well, also in the AI industry, and they've raised about $35 million, and they're looking to do rights offerings and get loans, further loans, to try and get to about, I think, $120 million. So you do have these other companies now really going for the adoption. But what's interesting to me is there's around 7 other companies that have announced but haven't acquired. And I did a tweet a couple of days ago about certain companies with investment bankers telling companies essentially to announce Bitcoin as a treasury strategy, because we've seen with MicroStrategy, Semler Scientific, and all these other companies, huge share price appreciation, huge trading volume, huge liquidity. So they think this is just an easy way to boost the stock. I've done some analysis. It doesn't really materialize. Yeah, you may get that short-term bump, but it has to follow through with acquisition. And if you look at Kula, for example, their implied volatility is at like 200. So if Bitcoin as a volatility asset is around 60, You then have MicroStrategy, which is that levered play on Bitcoin, which is like double, which is trades 100 to 120 implied volatility. And then you have Cooler, which is like even higher. So I haven't looked into the instrument on why it's trading at such an extreme volatility. But even in the share price, it's up huge amounts and down huge amounts at any given day. But it's fascinating to see how each public company is announcing to the market in a very different way. Not everyone can recreate the MicroStrategy playbook. So Semler Scientific are using the at-the-market offering, the share sales into the market, like MicroStrategy. They've asked, or they've gone to the market for convertible bond offerings. They haven't done them yet, but I think each company, due to the industry they're in, the revenue they generate, the debt they hold, their aggression or their commitment to Bitcoin, it's all going to differentiate with one another. No one company will really have the same strategy.
Yeah, so fascinating. I mean, a couple of questions that come to mind here. The first is like when you said some companies did announcements, but they haven't bought. Like, what were these announcements like? What did they announce? Were they announcing that they were going to buy, or that they're just turning into a Bitcoin treasury company and that's it? Or what was the announcement like?
The board approved up to, and they seem to be around $1 million. So I don't know if that was the sweet spot for, okay, let's just approve $1 million and let's see what happens. But no, I think they get clearance for an amount, they test the waters, and nothing happens with the share price, or it doesn't materialize as much as they think, and then they have to go in and acquire the Bitcoin.
Yeah, to actually go and buy it then. Yeah. And then it might have the effect that they're wishing for. I mean, another thing that I keep on hearing, like, especially by skeptics, who are now looking at these companies, and maybe you just kind of proved them wrong because you mentioned a few companies as well from the AI space that might already be like, not sure if they're like having like actual revenues, but are certainly in a field which is interesting. But what I've been hearing is that a lot of people are saying, well, the companies that are buying Bitcoin are usually just like these zombie companies, because they've seen that their sort of their revenues got sort of stuck, they're not moving along anymore. It's just sort of flat, and now they found something where they can kind of revive, as you said, or try to revive the stock price. What do you say to this? Is it actually true? And would that be sort of a danger as well if like these zombie companies who besides Bitcoin don't have anything to show for that they start buying Bitcoin?
It depends on the company. MicroStrategy were a zombie company floating around a $1 billion market cap. They were around for 25 years, saw no real love from the market, no real share price appreciation. And look where they are now. Semler Scientific with an unbelievably strong underlying revenue business, and also got no love from the market. And they too were a zombie company. But again, if you look at it from an individual standpoint, I would treat myself as a zombie individual. You're kind of floating around. Before I was in crypto, I used to work for Hasbro, the toy manufacturer, in data and analytics, and not really having a purpose. Just, I was there, I liked data, I was good at it, so I went there. Well, yeah, I was just a zombie individual, not really understanding what to do with my money. Like Sailor, just kept hoarding cash. Obviously, you'd have a few percent on your savings, and you think, all right, that's the right thing to do. So El Salvador is a zombie country to an extent. Huge, one of the worst crime rates as a country, poor GDP. So the people, the individual, the company, the country that has been marginalized are the ones to see Bitcoin first, which makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I've never looked at it that way. It's actually a nice way to frame it, zombie individual. And if you are right after all. I mean, many people are just going about their day, and there's nothing really stuff which is spectacular that is happening. And then obviously Bitcoin sort of is this acceleration thing, that can sort of breathe new life into people, into companies, into governments. That's for sure. Because like, also, if you look at traditional stock markets, it's usually a few companies who are probably responsible for the entire performance, because they're the ones that are just like outweighing everyone, and a lot of people are just stuck, and that's an interesting way to look at. And also in terms of El Salvador, I mean, I think in terms of the crime rate, from what I'm hearing, it is going down like significantly. This is maybe not only because of Bitcoin, but just because like Bukele is doing a great job in containing these things. But in terms of Bitcoin, I found it so interesting that, for example, you saw the news as well. Like Tether is now relocating and is going to El Salvador. And I saw this tweet of like somebody saying, well, Tether makes as much profit as or almost as much profit a year as the GDP of El Salvador, which is just huge. If you think about it, that's such a profitable business is now like sort of relocating there and is setting up shop. So interesting. Any thoughts on that as well?
I haven't personally been to El Salvador. I've got a few people around me that have been and are huge one admirers of Bukele and of the country as well. And yeah, I think he's cleaning up economically, environmentally, socially, politically. And once you have all those things together, you can actually form a bedrock of society. You can have a family, you can have kids, you can have a long-term time view. You can actually think, oh, I can actually achieve something in the country. The money that actually goes into the country and not out of the country or stored within property. It has such huge primary, secondary effects that we can't see, and everything compounds. And I'm a big believer in compounding, and I think you have that. And it's the opposite to an extent in my country or Europe, where the compounding of the last 40 years has completely deteriorated where we live. And you're seeing that on a really, really big basis now. You're seeing that in the reverse. And that this is kind of I think what Bitcoin's kind of pricing in now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's exactly this, the compounding effect, but in a positive sense. I feel like, as you said, in Europe, we're negatively compounding, block after block or step by step, and then in these countries, it's exactly the opposite. I mean, I also recently, I haven't followed this, but Thailand seems to be opening up as well. And there seems to be something going on in terms of like opening up to Bitcoin. I don't know if you have read any news on that, but just interesting to hear. And I feel, this game theoretical aspect that Seiler and others have been talking about, which is really kicking in here.
The Far East, and I spent a lot of time in the Far East, they're streets ahead of Europe. So I think they'll adopt crypto way before Europe. When I was traveling in Asia, Tether was a much bigger use case than Bitcoin. Payments is like a real thing there. So it was great to see that kind of first world adoption. I do see Bitcoin as a primary store of value for the Western countries, and Tether or the stable coins is more for the second and third world countries in terms of payment. I don't think they'll be able to hedge inflation or volatility as well. So that's kind of how I see the two kind of diverging away from one another. But Tether, I think, are going to play a huge role in this new administration. You're seeing yields on government debt within America or globally still at 4.5%, 5%, and you're going to need buyers. And with Cantor Fitzgerald and their relation with Tether, I think they're the third biggest. They are the third biggest primary buyer of 3-month US Treasuries. They would be the 18th biggest buyer of US Treasuries in general if they were a country. And I think that's only going to, again, escalate. So, that Tether are going to be a big player, and they're buying Bitcoin as well. So they'll be a big player for the next 4 years.
Yeah, exactly. And let's not forget this. They're buying Bitcoin like they announced that they would do it quarterly, right? And I'm not sure that they've really done it quarterly, or maybe they just didn't announce it quarterly, but at least yeah, it's true. I mean, I've met Paolo and all the people in Lugano, where Plan B is obviously Tether is like heavily involved, I guess. And yeah, it's interesting to see that they're like true Bitcoiners running this really probably one of the best companies in terms of performance and what you get. Definitely on the planet, like the best. Yeah,
10 people together and most profitable per employee or
yeah,
in the world.
I heard it's around 100 by now, because they're also sort of now scaling up, because I think that they're venturing into AI and sort of commodity lending stuff. So that they're really becoming like this shadow bank, or they already are. And so obviously with these many like deep pockets, you can venture in all types of other business branches and stuff. So that's certainly very interesting to see. But I quickly want to come back to this thing, that you were talking about with the different companies now, like getting Bitcoin exposure as a sort of Bitcoin treasury companies. That it almost felt like, and it was nice that you were saying that this is none of these companies, or no one company is the same. They all have these like different structure, and that's why it's also sort of probable that they will trade differently, because that's what I was always asking myself also, sort of as a layman, like what if we have tons of companies and they all hold Bitcoin on their treasury or on their balance sheet? Aren't they just going to be all the same? And you just kind of alluded to it, probably not because of a different structure. But then I think we could almost say we're getting a sort of Bitcoin linked stock market, and maybe you have any thoughts around this and how that could develop in the future.
Yeah, so one of the companies that bought Bitcoin, they said in the press release that it was a highly liquid market, short-term investment for asset growth. So they weren't alluding to essentially that it's a long-term play, so they're going for a short-term appreciation. And if they bought at around 94,000, they've made significant profit already. So yeah, it does again depend on the company. You'll also see it with the ETFs. So we had the spot Bitcoin ETFs. They've been there now for 1 year. And you've seen with these new announcements from Bitwise, so they've done if any public treasury company holds 1,000 Bitcoin, they'll be put in this ETF. Strive have also announced an ETF where it will include any convertible bond from any Bitcoin company, so MicroStrategy or Mara Raya. So, and I spoke to the CEO of Strive, and he was like, there's no point recreating the same ETF as BlackRock because it's done. They've got the market share. So you have to find new and novel ways to fit into this space. And you sit there thinking, well, what else can be done? And he said something to me that just stuck with me. Bitcoin isn't just an asset. Bitcoin is an asset class. So within itself, it's an asset class. And it's so true, because there are so many different iterations that you can spin off on Bitcoin. You've got the options on the ETF. It's just incredible how deep and liquid this market can really go.
Yeah. Also, again, very interesting, because that just clicks something with me, or at least like something I want to think about in more depth myself, because obviously we've been hearing this for quite some time. I also work for a traditional Swiss bank, where I'm on the crypto side or digital asset side of things. And there, obviously, crypto and digital assets, they're kept on being called a new asset class, and then you have like the Bitcoiners who are saying, no, crypto, like all of the other assets is just like sort of, most of them are just purely speculation, and Bitcoin is the asset class. And then I went like, as a Bitcoiner and at heart, I was always like, yeah, that sort of makes sense. I see that a lot of these other things is just speculation, but how can Bitcoin as one asset be an asset class, and now you're sort of telling me, okay, but like Bitcoin, the asset, but it can be used in so many different ways. And obviously on top of it, you can then build, again, more nuanced and sophisticated structures in terms of like with all the companies that are adopting Bitcoin. So this then actually turns into its own actual asset class, which is sort of diverse. Am I getting this right, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, yeah. Like it's just how Bitcoin means different things to different people, and you arrive at Bitcoin in completely different avenues. So if you come through, I don't know, the inflation route or any other route. So it's just, again, I think it's up for interpretation, and you can interpret it in any other way. But I do now see Bitcoin as an asset class, and you start have to put buckets into certain sections on what asset you're actually talking about within Bitcoin. Like we will see a futures market within the block space within. So like it's just how everything's going to start. You've got hash rate, and you'll have futures on the hash rate. You'll have so many different variations of futures markets on so many different things that it hasn't even kind of happened yet. So you can start paying for future block space, for example. So I don't know, there's just so many different things and iterations that will come, which is the best thing about the space, because traditional finance is pretty much maxed out. And this has just got all the gadgets, the fun, and you'll see a brain drain as well, which is which you've already seen for the past few years. But you will see the top people leave TradFi to play with these new instruments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. We're seeing it already, as you said. In terms of the miner, I would be curious as well what thoughts you have there, because like when it comes to miner, also now like Mara, like leveraging up on buying Bitcoin for the treasury as well. Sort of some people again who are skeptical are saying, well, this is like a levered play on Bitcoin itself. They're already like the whole business model revolves around Bitcoin, and which is in some sense makes sense to get more exposure to Bitcoin, but they're already earning in Bitcoin and now buying more Bitcoin. It's maybe just like, yeah, in a bull market territory, this might make sense, but wait until another bear market hit, then this can also kind of unravel in a nasty sense. So what do you think? Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, I do have concern around the miners. Again, you saw last year the first iteration of the AI HPC space, where it wasn't accretive or profitable for miners to solely be mining Bitcoin. So they pivoted into a whole new industry, which left a few sole pure play miners such as Mara, Riot, CleanSpark to carry on. And it's interesting to see, for example, Mara as the biggest miner with the deepest pockets. Okay, we need to now buy Bitcoin through convertible notes. They're also now doing lending. So they haven't given a figure. They've said a mid-single digit figure. So we can speculate on what that number is. So, and I don't know what their cost of production is, which was one of the hardest things. Being a minor investor, you can't really officially know their cost of production. So, but every time Bitcoin continued to break new highs, everyone in the mining industry, we were hearing, this is the time the miners break out. This is the time the miners break out. And again, some of them have, some of them haven't. But if you compare the ticker WGMI, the Valkyrie ETF, which is a consolidation of the group of miners, it has severely underperformed MicroStrategy. And I do think it will continue. They have an underlying business that is within Bitcoin, but there is so many complications within the business that it's really, really hard to understand it. MicroStrategy has a very, very, very simple business model. And I think I learned that the market loves clarity. The market wants to know black and white what your business model is, what you're going to be able to project the next however many years, and that's it. And I think MicroStrategy, a lot of people don't get it. You do have to do a lot of work, but the business is relatively straightforward. It's just buy Bitcoin and manage your debt levels and service those debt levels and reissue new debt to buy more Bitcoin. And the market loves it.
Mm. Yeah, great way to say it. I mean, in terms of like miners, and because I'm hearing this from friends usually who have bought into miners because they heard about Bitcoin and then like, oh, I'm not going to buy Bitcoin myself, but I want to get some exposure through the miners. And now they keep on asking me, hey, when are miners ever going to outperform again? And I think like if you look at the history, it's really there's like sort of like short periods of time where miners have maybe actually outperformed Bitcoin. So my question, have you thought about this as well? Is there any reason for like normies to buy mining stocks, or is it some sort of another pursuit ballpark or?
I think it's the same as I can't afford Bitcoin, so I'm going to buy Ethereum or I'll buy Solana. It's the unit bias. You've got Mara trading at $17-18 a share. You have even like Cypher or other miners trading in single digits, so you can get a lot of shares for the same amount of value that you want to invest. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. Maybe I just don't understand the mining industry enough. I probably don't. But that is also another issue. There are about 15, 20, if not more, publicly traded miners. To continue to do the work is really hard because you need to objectively look at every miner and see which one's better. And it's incredibly difficult to keep up with everything. But I think for me, which was really interesting, was how all these assets kind of performed in January of last year when the ETF launched, and you had loads of rotation going out. Everything was going up, obviously, because Bitcoin was appreciating October to beginning of January 2023 into 2024. And then as soon as the ETF happened, everything kind of went down because everyone was anticipating this rotation into the ETF. And the ETFs outperformed MicroStrategy and the miners for a very short amount of time. And then you look at the 1 year chart, MicroStrategy has just obliterated IBIT. So to me, that says market has, again, no one knows. Most people don't know what is going to happen, even though crypto Twitter are very confident on calling every bottom and top. But I think, again, the market has spoken that one MicroStrategy isn't an ETF. And the miners are completely different vehicle as well.
Mm-hmm. I see. Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe I'm zigzagging here a little, but I want to go back to MicroStrategy as well, or like further go down that route because like MicroStrategy, yeah, it's now part of the QQQ, Nasdaq, and obviously this has been touted by some people to provide like for passive flows into Bitcoin. Not sure what your thoughts are here, and then maybe also going forward in 2025, like. Because I feel like, as we said, maybe before we started the podcast, like MicroStrategy is still sort of going strong and commonly misunderstood or widely misunderstood. And maybe why is this? Is there also like the inclusion into the S&P 500 coming up, or what's going to happen in 2025 with MicroStrategy? Any insights you have there?
So I put MicroStrategy as a pure leverage play on Bitcoin. I don't put the miners on a pure leverage play on Bitcoin. MicroStrategy, for me, is even Semler Scientific. They hold, I think, 2,000 Bitcoin, but the majority, like a lot of their business is still coming through a medical business, so they're not a pure leverage play. MicroStrategy, the only pure leverage play. And if I do think Bitcoin is going to do tremendously well this year. It's already cracking at trying to go through $100,000. So this will be the fourth time it will try and get through 100,000. So I think once it does get through that, and we can actually go into this bull market, yeah, MicroStrategy will appreciate significantly, in my opinion. He's done three instruments in order to acquire Bitcoin: cash on hand, the at the market share sales, the at the market offering, and the convertible bonds. And he's done now he's announced the 2 billion of perpetual preferred stock. The terms haven't come out yet, so no one knows what they're going to look like. that it's a really interesting way to find a new way of being accretive for shareholders. So no one knows what the dividend payout is. I'm hearing 5, 6, 7%. But they get a priority in terms of the preferred shareholders, in terms of if there's a liquidation event, they get paid out first. So this would be attractive to insurance companies, banks, pension funds with that stable dividend. It already depends on what these terms are going to be, which supposedly get announced in Q1.
But you think he will, besides these preferred share issuance, is he also going to keep on doing like the convertible bonds and the ATM offerings? Is it going to be a mixture of everything in 2025 that Saylor is still going to pull off of MicroStrategy?
Yes, so I think he's got about 6-7 billion left on his ATM. Before that, the 21 billion plan was put in place on October 31st. That was a week before anyone knew about anyone knew the outcome in the US election. And let's be honest, mainstream media were pinning this as 50-50. Even though obviously Trump won the landslide and the majority, we were told it was 50-50. So he put out the most audacious plan a week before we could have seen a heavily regulated market with the Harris administration. So that one shows his conviction that he does not care who was at the helm. On October 31st, Bitcoin goes down, MicroStrategy goes up on a $42 billion raise. Like, the market's never seen that before. That was the largest ATM raise of all time. So it was fascinating to see how the market initially reacted to that. So yeah, I do believe Q1, there may be a blackout period as we get closer to his earnings in February the 3rd or 4th. But they have roughly a 17% debt to assets ratio. So they've got around $7 billion of convertible debt. And I don't know the figure off the top of my head on how many dollars in assets of Bitcoin they've got. They obviously hold 450,000 Bitcoin now. So 45 billion if we're going to do it off a $100,000 price. So he has leverage to grow. So I think historically the average is around 20-25%. He's at around 17, so he's got room. He's also got, I think, 2027 and 2030. I think those two convertible notes are already eligible for conversion. So he can call one of them in, which will reduce the interest payments on the debt. I think they've got at least 0.6% on the debt. So the money that he would save back, he can then put into the dividend payments on top of the cash that the business generates. So he's got so many levers to pull, which increases the volatility, obviously, because if there's so much uncertainty or like I have no idea what he's going to do, that deserves a higher volatility on the stock.
Yeah, and volatility is what he needs eventually. Yeah, what his stocks need, what his stock needs. That's for sure. But I mean, you said 17% is the debt to asset ratio. Is that it? Around that doesn't sound highly over leveraged. Some people would.
It's not over. He's not over leveraged at all. That was the last I checked. I don't know the number off, but it's around that. Yes, yeah. He's under leveraged. I think he even said he's under leveraged. So these convertible bonds that will be coming increase the leverage. So that will increase the volatility on the stock.
I see. Yeah. And any thoughts on, just curious, because like there's also a lot of fuss about these FASB rules, who have or supposedly have changed already. I mean, they've been in the talks for a year already when they were like so originally announced that this is going to happen. And then at the end of 2024, they would actually kick in. And then some people said it's going to be by the start of 2025. But now here we are. It's January 2025, so my question is, what is the effect of these going to be, and how can kind of sort of MicroStrategy profit from this, and maybe potentially also other Bitcoin treasury companies?
So Semler Scientific, for example, announced a Bitcoin strategy in May of last year. They adopted FASB straight away because it made sense. MicroStrategy then have to the last cutoff point is Q1. So Q1, so we're getting Q4's earnings. Q1 in May will be its first FASB, and it essentially allows the company to report gains or losses on a fair value basis, because at the moment they can only report on it from a loss standpoint. So for FASB, I do believe it changes a lot for MicroStrategy, but it's important to note that the unrealized Bitcoin gains for MicroStrategy historically are only booked onto the retained earnings, not through the income statement. So they will only reflect during that quarter and not prior quarters on the income statement. So the prior gains don't skew everything. So it has to have a fair look at it. But I did a small analysis today. At the start of the quarter, or the start of the year, let me just get it up. MicroStrategy started the quarter with 447,470 Bitcoin. This is increased in value by $3,108 per Bitcoin, generating a gain of 1.4 billion. They've acquired just over 2,500 Bitcoin, contributing to another $5 million in gains. So their fair value gain is already 1.4 billion. So the price of Bitcoin started at 93,500 for the year. That's where your starting point is. And if they've got their earnings in May, if we have a great Q1 in Bitcoin terms, you could be looking at a huge earnings per share. So I think that's where we're at. And for the S&P 500 inclusion, it's 4 consecutive quarters of profitability. So I imagine it could go straight in from Q1, but maybe the market needs some time to adjust.
Well, you mean straight in from Q1, but I mean, in 2024, MicroStrategy hasn't probably not been profitable in all of the quarters, right? Or how would I have to assess this? I should say 4 quarters, starting only now, it would only be in Q4 of 2025 that they could actually be included, right? Or could we sort of...
I need to double check on that, but I'm pretty sure it's Q1. It could be after Q1. But yeah, I just need to double check on that.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm not sure myself, but yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of like undercurrents pushing MicroStrategy ever further. And as you just explained, as you said, like if Bitcoin has a really great quarter, and then they can actually kind of on the income statement then also show all of these profits and gains, this, as you said, would make them even more undervalued, like in terms of traditional value metrics, like the PE ratio that you just mentioned, and that could just contribute to more flows into MSTR. So that's what I think is so interesting. Yeah, I mean, we've been talking for almost 40 minutes. Do you wanted to say something? Sorry.
No, it was just in terms of the triple Q inclusion, that I think the top 5 ETFs globally, 4 of them are due to the S&P 500. So yeah, the triple Q is huge, and I can't remember the flows that they get from it, but I think the S&P 500 really takes it to it does take it to a new level. So it will be interesting to see what kind of market cap MicroStrategy can get to from that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, exactly. Well, as I said, we've already been talking for over 40 minutes. So I have two questions left that I would like to ask you. One is like really your outlook now for Bitcoin in terms of this year and where we're going, because you had this tweet, or I saw this one tweet, somebody tweeted S&P 500 and Bitcoin will make a new all-time high before February 21st. And you commented, well, agree, and then continuation of new highs into April, July, and October. So I'd be curious to know your rationale there. And then the other question, maybe to finish up, would just be, because that's something I'm getting also by some friends of mine and other people that are asking me, like, how long will Bitcoin keep going up? Is there ever going to be an end to this? And but maybe we can tackle the first question first.
Yeah. Well, the first question is, I believe we're still in a 4-year cycle. And I believe we're still tracking the prior 2 cycles very, very closely. So this is something that I've observed. I went bullish Bitcoin this cycle at the beginning of 2023 because the FTX collapse was a textbook bottom, and then we started to appreciate, and we were tracking these 2 cycles. So as a reference point, those 2 cycles continue to make new highs, and we're looking at that 2017 bull run where Bitcoin made a 10x. So a 10x from here is $1 million a coin. I'm not saying we're going to hit. I don't think we're going to hit $1 million a coin. I have around a 250,000 price target, but I do believe that we will continue to follow these prior cycles. The interesting part is that the dollar has probably topped, yields have probably topped, similar to what happened when Trump got inaugurated on the first time, that the dollar topped around his inauguration and risk assets flied. So I'm thinking it's a very similar scenario. So yes, that's kind of how I'm seeing 2025 play out. I think the biggest question is really, do we get a blow off top or not? I don't know yet. But the longer we can consolidate, so I'm loving this price action at 90,000. That's a month at 90,000. We haven't gone really below it. So the longer we can consolidate, it just makes it so much healthier on that downside. And then I was speaking to someone, if we get a blow off top or we get that Q4 2025 top, what happens if there's a huge company or a huge country or someone that announces they bought Bitcoin and it mitigates that downside risk? We do have the ETFs, we have Sailor, we have these perpetual buyers now. So that could take some downside volatility and downside risk away. But I think that 4-year cycle will have to break at some point.
Mm-hmm. Not just quite yet. So interesting. Well, I mean, what you mentioned is exactly spot on. In terms of the inauguration day and how like risk assets have traditionally fared after this. I just saw this graph today as well by some people at Bitcoin Suisse, also a company that's located in Switzerland, and they also had they compared these crypto markets to like prior inauguration periods, or days after the inauguration day. And it was always especially after in 2017 and 21, I think it was probably, or the 15 probably, it must have been, and then it rallied quite hard, obviously, and that was just interesting to see. Exactly. Well, I mean, the last question then is just to finish up here, how obviously you said the 4-year cycle will break at some point, but how long will Bitcoin keep going up? I mean, is it like really, Michael Saylor said, it's gonna go up, Laura, forever. What are your thoughts around this? And obviously, some people think in the long term it will, but then you will have these troughs, where it's going down again. But how do you personally position yourself? Is that something you can say or elaborate on? Like just from a high level point of view, if we think like, okay, going higher, are you just hodling, or are you sort of like try to swing trade this on higher time frames, or how are you doing this? If you can speak to this.
Uh, d- I do think it's going up on the basis that they will continue to print money forever. That's just the nature of the beast. Um, the Dodge in America is great, cut spending, but you can only cut as much spending as there really is until you actually materially break something. In a deflationary event, Bitcoin probably does the best anyway, compared to real estate or equities, because there is so much inflated value above what the fair value of these things are. So I think even in a deflationary environment, Bitcoin does succeed. But how I'm positioning it is no, I think I'm sure like you have a certain amount in cold storage. You have a certain amount that you invest as a short term, medium term, and you mitigate your risk accordingly. So it's I think everyone has a different risk profile depending on your age, the appetite for risk. It all depends on the individual.
Great. Yeah, for sure. That's exactly it. I mean, that's always some good advice there. Like everyone has to figure it out for themselves. But I always say, yeah, obviously, I feel like, as you said, because of continuous money printing, this thing has no roof, so to say, and obviously, the longer you are in the game, the better. And as you said, maybe you have like this side pot of some money that you can start gaming around with, but just make sure you have like your cold storage back just in case, because like, that's probably the best long term. Well, Chase, thanks a lot. Yeah.
I have one last thing. I just remembered the MicroStrategy S&P 500. It was based on it was a cumulative positive earnings over the trailing past 4 quarters. Meaning, if they have a blowout Q1 and it mitigates the 4 previous quarters of losses, so added together, that would qualify for S&P 500 inclusion. But I would bet the committee to be like, okay, maybe we need to see a couple of quarters, not just one. They're like, why is there just one random positive quarterly earnings report? So it was on the basis of the trading past 4 quarters. And I think a really good analogy would have been Tesla when they entered the S&P 500. I think there's a lot of analogies between a MicroStrategy and Tesla, and then what happened when they entered the S&P 500.
Yeah, I remember with Tesla, exactly. It was just also the case that they were kind of like really not wanting to include them. So they were really like trying to refrain from it, but at some point Tesla just became too much of a performing stock, and then obviously it's also in your fiduciary duty sort of as an index provider to take these companies into the index, right? Because otherwise you're just like messing things up there for customers and people who are actually trading on top of your indices, So I think this will also play in the hands of MicroStrategy, I think, long term.
Yeah, I think we'll get a lot of front running before maybe that Q1. And if we don't get it on the Q1, Q2 or Q3, which is just further tailwinds for the industry. And I think my last point is, I think the least amount of rate cuts this year is beneficial for a longer cycle. So if we can have rate cuts, or make no rate cuts or one rate cut this year, and then a couple of rate cuts next year, you're prolonging that easing cycle for the risk assets. So that's something that I hope that inflation stays hot, growth stays hot, and that will mean rates are elevated, which is materially bad for real estate and bonds. And then I'm hoping that money kind of seeps out going into equities and Bitcoin.
I see. Yeah, great. Well, I mean, I wanted to finish here, but one thing I think I need to ask you still, because like I think it's gonna otherwise gonna be thrown at my head. It's like we've talked that much about MicroStrategy and how bullish this can be for Bitcoin, but the number one question that I often hear is like people. You are a Bitcoiner. Why do you cherish that MicroStrategy is buying up all of the supply, so to say? It's holding now maybe how much is it by now? 2% of the supply? I don't have the numbers at the top of
Yeah.
my head, but it's just materially, obviously. Yeah. What are your thoughts? Is there any risk there, like material risk, so to say, or I mean, it's a train we just can't stop, or yeah, like what? How do you think about this?
So all of MicroStrategy's Bitcoin is unencumbered. So there's no liquidation risk. So he hasn't pledged any of his Bitcoin for any of the debt obligations. So that's a risk that's gone. I don't care. The market shouldn't care who does what. Everyone's entitled to buy as much or sell as much. Like if we had 1 million Bitcoin between us and we sell it into the market right now, is that fair? It's a capitalist free market network. There's going to be people that like it, don't like it, and why is anyone's opinion even matter? Does it have any long-term negative effects? We could go into the discussion on a fork potentially. I think there's a more systemic risk on a fork with the ETFs, not with MicroStrategy. But that's a whole different discussion. But I think how I frame everything is with any issue with Bitcoin, low potentially of low fees, mining centralization, everything. You have to put it in a probability window. And if I think there's a 50% probability that this is going to corrupt the network, then yeah, it's high. Then I put it in a cause for concern. If I think it's really, really low, like you just have to weigh it up in that probability window. And I think MicroStrategy having a lot, 2%. Pantera Capital have 2%. He bought hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin in 2014, 13, and no one cared about it because no one cared for Bitcoin back then. And I'm sure there are whales out there. Well, there are whales out there, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, just don't know the entity. It's only because he's a known entity. And you could have had 50,000 Bitcoins each and no one would hear of us. So it's a bit like the government selling. It's a bit of a fugazi that
A lot of noise.
yeah, it's 50,000 Bitcoins a drop in the bucket honestly on a daily basis of trading volume. Like it's a narrative, and narratives always are the things that tell the paper.
Yeah, for sure. No, great way to end this. Well, I mean, just one last thing that I ask to most of my guests, is there anybody that comes to mind, that you think is another like high signal person we should be talking to on the podcast? Like anyone that spontaneously comes to mind?
Yeah, for me is Jeff Park, the head of Alpha Strategies at Bitwise. Everything he says, I have to read over, probably put it into ChatGPT most of the time. But yeah, he's great to follow.
Nice. Yeah, I've been following him as well, and it's the same for me. I would say I would probably understand even less, but it sounds also good. But I mean, I definitely have to get him on the pod at some point because the thing is just I have like now you're going to be, I guess, my 20th or 21st episode. 21st would actually be nice in terms of Bitcoin, debt related stuff. But and I mean, I already had like 2 people from Bitwise on, like my first episode, it was Andre Dragos, which used to be for ETP group, and now it's like they were bought by Bitwise, and then Matt Hogan as well, who's like their chief investment officer. So, but at some point, I will definitely have to talk to Jeff as well. So Great pick. Well, James, thanks a lot for your time. Now it's almost coming up to an hour, but I really enjoyed the chat. Some really great lines and stuff that you shared with us here. And hope to be doing this in the future again. So have a great one.
Cheers. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Bye.